Right, a quick confession to start. I find nutrition advice genuinely exhausting. One week, carbs are fine. The next, they're the enemy. Fat is back. Sugar is the real problem. Actually, it's ultra processed food. Have you tried seed oils? What about your cortisol? And underneath all of that noise, you're just trying to work out what to eat for dinner. Welcome to, or welcome back to, the New 5 a Day. I'm Nick Walters, and this is episode 2 of the New 5 a Day. And today we are visiting Pillar 2, Eat Well, and asking the question that sounds obvious but turns out to be surprisingly slippery. What is a balanced diet anyway? We're not going to count calories, talk about macros, or tell you to give up anything you enjoy. What we're going to do is cut through some of the confusion with some actual science, kept friendly, I promise, and come out the other side with a few ideas that might genuinely help. Let's go. So, balanced diet. What does that actually mean? The honest answer is simpler than the internet would have you believe. A balanced diet means eating a wide variety of foods in broadly sensible proportions most of the time, so that your body gets the nutrients it needs to work well and feel good. That's the whole definition. Not a calorie target, not a list of banned foods, variety, proportion, consistency. In the UK, the NHS Eat Well Guide gives us a useful way to picture this. It divides food into 3 groups and suggests roughly how much of each should make up your overall diet. I'll walk you through it quickly. First and biggest is fruit and vegetables, just over a third of everything you eat. The aim is at least 5 portions a day across as many different colours and types as you can manage. And good news, fresh, frozen, tinned and dried all count equally. A bag of frozen peas is not a nutritional compromise. It's just a frozen pea. 2, starchy carbohydrates, bread, pasta, rice and potatoes, also about a third. Whole grain versions are better when you can manage it, but the basic versions are not the enemies they've been made out to be. Then there's protein, a smaller portion. Meat, fish, eggs, beans, pulses, tofu. You probably eat more protein than you need if you're in the UK, but the type matters, and we'll come back to that. Dairy or alternatives, a moderate amount. Milk, yogurt, cheese, or plant-based versions with added calcium. And unsaturated fats, a small amount. Olive oil, nuts, seeds, avocado. Then there's everything else, the biscuits, the wine, the chocolates, the crisps, that sits outside the main guide. Not banned, not shameful, just not the foundation. And here's the one thing I want you to hold on to from this section. You don't need to get this balance right at every meal. Think across the day. Think across the week. A plate of pasta doesn't need to be a nutritional masterclass. That's exactly what over time means. Here's where a lot of nutrition advice goes wrong. It treats eating well as binary. You're either being good or you've fallen off the wagon. You're on the diet or you've abandoned it. And this framing is not just unhelpful, it is actively counterproductive. The research consistently shows that rigid, all or nothing approaches to eating are harder to sustain and often lead to the exact cycle of restriction and overindulgence that leaves people feeling worse than when they started. The more useful mental model is this. Look at the week, not the meal. Look at the pattern, not the plate. One pizza night doesn't undo a week of eating reasonably well. One virtuous salad at lunch doesn't offset everything else. It's the overall pattern across months and years that shapes your health, and that pattern is much more forgiving than any diet plan would have you believe. If most of your meals, most of the time, have some vegetables in them, some whole grain, a reasonable amount of protein, and aren't entirely dominated by heavily processed food, you are, by any reasonable scientific definition, eating a balanced diet. That's it. That's what it looks like in practice. So, why does this actually matter? What does eating well or not actually do to your body over time? 3 things worth knowing. First, the overall picture. A diet broadly in line with those eat well principles, plenty of veg, whole grains, reasonable protein, not too much processed stuff, is consistently linked to lower risk of the conditions that most affect our health span: heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and certain cancers. This isn't one study, it's decades of evidence across millions of people across different countries and cultures. The signal is clear. The dietary pattern with the single strongest evidence base is the Mediterranean diet. Not because you need to suddenly start eating Greek food, but because what it represents is a template. Lots of vegetables, fruit, legumes, whole grains, olive oil, fish, high plant variety, low processed meat, moderate everything else. The research on this pattern is remarkable, including large randomized trials showing it reduces major cardiovascular events by around 30%. Second, variety. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting. We now know that the gut microbiome, the community of trillions of bacteria in your digestive system, has a profound influence on health. It affects digestion, immune function, inflammation, metabolic health, and emerging evidence suggests it plays a role in mental health too, via what researchers call the gut-brain axis. And the diet that best supports a healthy, diverse microbiome is, you guessed it, a diverse diet. A wider range of different plant foods supports a wider range of beneficial bacteria, which supports better health outcomes. Some researchers now suggest aiming for 30 different plant foods per week, not as a strict target, but as a way of thinking about variety. It sounds like a lot until you start counting. A handful of nuts is 3 or 4 plants. A stir fry with mixed vegetables is 5 or 6. It adds up quickly. The simpler message: variety isn't just about getting all your nutrients. It's about feeding your gut in a way that feeds you back. Third, the long game. What does a poor diet actually do over time? The research shows it's not dramatic. It's slow and cumulative. A diet heavy in refined carbohydrates, processed meat, and ultra-processed foods is associated with gradual increases in blood pressure, chronic low-grade inflammation, changes in blood glucose regulation, and weight gain, all of which increase risk of the big health conditions over decades. The encouraging flip side: the body responds to improvement at any age. Even relatively modest shifts in dietary pattern are associated with measurable improvements in health markers. You don't have to overhaul everything. Tilting the balance, a bit more variety, a bit more whole food, a bit less heavily processed stuff, moves things in the right direction. Now, you've probably heard about ultra-processed foods, UPFs, because they've been all over the news. So what's actually going on? Ultra-processed foods are broadly products that have been significantly transformed from their original state, containing ingredients you wouldn't find in a home kitchen: emulsifiers, stabilizers, artificial flavors, added sugars, and fats engineered for palatability. Think mass-produced bread, most breakfast cereals, ready meals, biscuits, fizzy drinks, processed meat, most snack foods. The evidence linking high UPF consumption to poor health outcomes has been building fast. The biggest review to date, published in the BMJ in 2024, covering data from nearly 10 million people, found associations between high UPF intake and 32 different adverse health outcomes, including cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, depression, and several cancers. So, should you panic about everything with an ingredient list? Absolutely not. Here's the honest picture. Most of this research is observational. It shows association, not definitive cause. Not all UPFs are equally problematic. A tin of baked beans is technically ultra-processed. So is a pot of low-fat yogurt. The evidence is strongest for processed meats, sugar-sweetened drinks, and industrial-produced baked goods and snacks. The practical message is this: the more of your diet that comes from whole or minimally processed food, and the less from heavily manufactured ones, the better. That's a direction of travel, Not a ban. A tin of tomatoes is great. Frozen peas are fantastic. A packet of smoked salmon is perfectly reasonable. The question to ask isn't, is this processed? It's, what does the overall picture look like? And if the overall picture includes plenty of whole food, some variety, and some pleasure, you're going to be doing just fine. Now, let's talk about the noise, because if you follow nutrition news at all, you'll know that it can feel like the science is constantly contradicting itself. One week, carbs are the enemy. The next, it's fat. Then it's specifically saturated fat. Then it's seed oils, actually. The Mediterranean diet is in. Then keto is in. Then intermittent fasting. Then your cousin is posting about carnivore, and you don't know what to believe anymore. Here's what's actually going on. Nutrition science is genuinely difficult. People eat complicated, varied, socially embedded meals across entire lifetimes. You can't run a 40-year randomized controlled trial on a diet. Self-reported food surveys are notoriously imprecise. Many studies are small, short-term, or funded by industries with an interest in the result. And real individual variation exists. The same diet genuinely affects different people differently. But underneath all the headlines, a few things have stayed remarkably consistent across decades of research and across completely different populations around the world. Eat plenty of vegetables and fruit. Include whole grains where you can. Favor beans, pulses, fish, and lean proteins. Keep heavily processed foods as a smaller part of the picture. Don't drink a lot of sugar. And don't worry too much about individual foods. Look at the overall pattern. These principles haven't changed. The headlines have. That's the difference. Right, on to the practical bit. Because the goal here isn't just to understand what a balanced diet is, it's to actually eat one. And that has to work for your life, your budget, your schedule, your culture, your relationship with the food, and the people you eat with. A diet that's nutritionally optimal but miserable and unsustainable is not, in any meaningful sense, a balanced diet. A diet that makes you feel well, that you enjoy, that you can keep up across months and years. That's what we're actually going for. Now, 5 starting points. Pick 1 or 2, not all 5. Number 1, add before you subtract. Instead of starting by cutting things out, try adding 1 extra portion of vegetables to a meal you already make. It's easier to do, and it naturally crowds out less nutritious choices without making you feel deprived. 2, frozen is not cheating. Frozen vegetables, fruit, fish, and pulses are just as nutritious as fresh, often more so because they're frozen immediately after harvest. They're also cheaper and less likely to wilt at the back of the fridge with good intentions but no follow-through. 3, variety over perfection. Eating a wider range of different vegetables, proteins, and grains is more valuable than eating the same 3 healthy foods on repeat. Your gut bacteria will thank you. You're welcome. Aim to eat a few different things you wouldn't normally eat each week. It really doesn't have to be exotic. Number 4, think in weeks, not in individual meals, Monday through Sunday. If the week includes plenty of veg, some fruit, reasonable protein, and a few home-cooked or minimally processed meals, you're in genuinely good shape. 1 pizza night is not the problem. The pattern is what matters. And 5, possibly the most important one, give yourself permission to enjoy food. This is not a minor add-on. The evidence that stress, guilt, and a difficult relationship with eating causes its own health harms is real. Eating is one of life's consistent pleasures, one of the most reliable ways we connect with other people. Protecting that pleasure while broadly eating well is the goal, not sacrificing it. Now, eating well is pillar 2 of the new 5 a day, and it connects to all the others. What you eat affects your energy for being active. It shapes the quality of your sleep. It influences your mood and your ability to manage stress. And it's one of the most reliable ways humans connect with each other. Because food is social in a way that almost nothing else is. The goal isn't a perfect diet. It's a diet that's good enough most of the time, that you actually enjoy, and that gives your body what it needs to keep doing everything else you want to do with your life. That's what balanced really means. Not a ratio, not a rule, but a relationship with food that works for you over the long term. If you want to go deeper, there's a companion blog post on our website, www.new5aday.com, with a fuller evidence-based version for those who want the science in more detail. We've also put together a full citation list covering all the research we've drawn on today. Now, next episode, we're going to move on to Pillar 3, be active. Same approach, no guilt, just the evidence on movement, what counts and why it matters for people who run marathons and people who currently walk to the kettle and call it cardio. Hey, share this episode with someone who needs it. That's genuinely the best thing you can do for us at this stage, and we'd love to hear from you at www.new5aday.com. Take care of yourselves and eat well.